Caesarea is a city that's by the sea, by the Mediterranean Sea. I don't know, I guess my map's too small, but here's the Mediterranean Sea, here's Joppa on the coast, and here's Caesarea. I've been there. It's a real city, and I've stood where Herod the Great's big castle was, and been all over where this would have taken place, okay, where these guys would have been stationed. And Caesarea is named after, it was named by Herod, who we'll see in a minute, in honor of Caesar Augustus, who was the Roman emperor of the day, okay? So Herod was kind of under Caesar, and Caesar was the ruler of the Roman Empire. And we're going to read verses 1 through 8 real quick. And so we've got this man named Cornelius. He's of the Italian regiment. That means that he was not Jewish, okay? He was a Roman. Is everybody with me? Okay. He and all his family were devout and God-fearing. He gave generously to those in need and prayed to God regularly. One day, at about 3 in the afternoon, he had a vision. He distinctly saw an angel of God who came to him and said, "Cornelius." Cornelius stared at him in fear. "What is it, Lord?" he asked. The angel answered, "Your prayers and gifts to the poor have come up as a memorial offering before God. Now send men to Joppa to bring back a man named Simon, who is called Peter. He is staying with Simon the tanner, whose house is by the sea." When the angel who spoke to him had gone, Cornelius called 2 of his servants and a devout soldier who was one of his attendants. He told them everything that had happened and sent them to Joppa. So here we're introduced to a man named Cornelius. He's a man who lived by faith in a God, and from his faith came a fruit of, we see him being generous and being spiritually disciplined. We'll read on later how during this time he was actually in one of his ritual prayer sessions. So he regularly set aside time to have prayer time, which, we could draw out all kinds of principles of, are we regularly setting aside time to talk to God, seek God's will, read our Bibles, those kinds of things. And the more you walk with Jesus, the longer you walk with the Lord, the more you will become aware that without being disciplined, you cannot be a disciple. If you look at the word disciple and discipline have almost the same letters in them. And so there's a very tight correlation between being disciplined and being able to call yourself the Lord's disciple. And so you need to be thinking about that as you're growing in the Lord. Am I being disciplined for the purposes of godliness? Do I set aside a time? I would prefer in the mornings, but whenever is going to work. Just that you're doing it. So we see that Cornelius has a fruit of generosity. He gave to the poor. He's regularly in prayer. Although he had never heard the gospel, he believed in God and he trusted him. And he sought to know the Lord, and the Lord responds to him in a really big way. So as we read on, watch for the way God prepares the hearts of these 2 men. So, let me turn my page here. Okay, I'm going to start reading in verse 9 of chapter 10. We're still in chapter 10. About noon the following day, as they were on their journey and approaching the city, Peter went up on the roof to pray. He became hungry and wanted something to eat. So we were in Caesarea. If you'll look on your maps, Caesarea's up here, a little bit to the north, and Joppa's about 15 miles to the south. So we're in a different city with a different character change, okay? We had Cornelius, now we're back to Peter the apostle. So Peter's up there and he's hungry and he's gone to pray and he wanted something to eat, and while the meal was being prepared, he fell into a trance. He saw heaven open and something like a large sheet being let down to earth by its 4 corners. It contained all kinds of 4-footed animals, as well as reptiles of the earth and birds of the air. Then a voice called to him, "Get up, Peter, kill and eat." "Surely not, Lord," Peter replied. "I've never eaten anything impure or unclean." The voice spoke to him a second time. "Do not call anything impure that God has made clean." This happened 3 times, and immediately the sheet was taken back to heaven. And while Peter was still wondering about the meaning of this vision, the men sent by Cornelius found out where Simon's house was and stopped at the gate. They called out, asking if Simon, who was known as Peter, was staying there. While Peter was still thinking about the vision, the Spirit said to him, "Simon, 3 men are looking for you. So get up and go downstairs. Do not hesitate to go with them, because I have sent them." Peter went down and said to the men, "I'm the one you're looking for. Why have you come?" And the men replied, "We have come from Cornelius the centurion. He is a righteous and God-fearing man who is respected by all the Jewish people. A holy angel told him to have you come to his house so that he could hear what you have to say." And then Peter invited the men to come into the house and to be his guests. So why do you think Peter was prepared by God the way he was, with this vision and all these specific instructions? Who knows a little bit about the Old Testament and could enlighten us? What was the deal with the sheet? I have no idea what you're going to say. What was the deal with the sheet coming down from heaven with all these animals on them? Does anybody know? Christina?
I don't know.
Well, in the Old Testament, God had given them specific rules about what they could eat and what they couldn't eat. So at this time, Peter was still a Jew above all Jews, and he was following the law, and he would not have eaten food that God told them not to eat. And you can go back in Leviticus if you want to make your eyes bleed, and you can read all of those rules about what you're supposed to eat and what you're not supposed to eat. So we can only assume that this sheet that came down had animals from the categories that they were not supposed to eat. So when he said, "Kill and eat," and Peter said, "No way, I've not ever done that. I will never do that." He says, "Don't call things impure that I call pure." Okay, is everybody with me now? So God is saying, I am doing something here. I'm doing a new thing, okay? That's what he's saying. Prior to this account in Acts, no Jew would have welcomed Gentiles into their homes. We see Peter being told by the Spirit to go down. There's 3 men coming for you. He goes down. They're all Gentiles, which I don't know if you know this, Nadia, but in the Bible, there's a lot of the use of that word, Gentile. And what it means is God chose a nation, and they're called Jews. Everybody else, me, probably you, and I think everybody in this room would be called a Gentile. Y'all don't have Jewish blood, do you? And you don't?
No.
Okay, there's one girl in my small group at Long Hollow that does. So I'm always like, she's Jewish. So anyway, we're all Gentiles, okay? Jews are a very peculiar people, and that's a word that's in the Bible. Okay, God made them peculiar for the purposes of showing his glory to other nations. Okay, so prior to this time, they would not have even allowed a Gentile into their home. Okay, that's how strict they were about their rules, and they would have felt like it would have made them unclean before the Lord to have a Gentile into their home. God had set up laws that required Israel as a nation to remain separate in their practices from Gentiles. So what I mean by that is God had required for his nation to not see what other nations did and take on their lifestyles. So the way that they worshiped their gods. There was a god in the Old Testament called the god of Molech. And when you go to Israel, you'll see mounds or sacrificial places to the god of Molech. And it's where the people that were not Jewish would sacrifice their own children to the god of Molech. Okay, and they still are there. You can still see these things. I have a picture of it if you want to see it. God did not want them to behave like that. And so he put up some rules against all that. But so that they would not be led astray by the idol worship of the unbelieving world, and so that the foreign nations would also see God's mighty hand as he acted for Israel. As usually happens, and this will happen to our own hearts, the Jews by this time had added to God's law